Okay, in this lesson we're going to address the following issues. We're going to look at what validation is and what verification is. We're going to understand the difference between validation and verification. We're also going to describe the different types of validation, the different types of verification, and we're going to understand how a check digit works. So let us begin. Data checking. How can we tell if data has been entered correctly? There's two different processes. There's verification and validation. Verification is done by a human. It's making sure that data is correctly transferred. It's very important that you understand that. You're checking that it's correctly transferred, maybe from a piece of paper onto the computer system, by a human from the medium of which it was originally stored on. This human check is usually carried out by either proofreading, confirmation, or double entry. And again, we'll look at these in a wee bit more detail. What is validation? Well, validation is an automatic check performed by the computer to ensure that the data entered is sensible and reasonable. It may not be correct, but it's sensible and it's reasonable. Okay, so how do you remember these two? Well, verification is verifying by a human. Validation is making sure that it's valid or sensible and reasonable, and it's done by a computer. Let's move on. So again, we said verification is making sure that it's correctly transferred and it's done by a human. These are the three different methods of doing it. The first one is what's known as double entry. If you have to change your password, you're going to enter it in twice just to make sure that it's entered in correctly. Okay, so double entry is entering the data in twice and comparing it. If the data matches, it's accepted. If the data differs, it's flagged up as an error. It takes a long time and costs extra money because you're having to enter the data in twice. However, it's good for short amounts of data, like changing your password. Verification can also be done by proofreading. Proofreading is checking over the work and making sure that there's no mistakes. It can take a long time and it does cost extra money. It can also be error prone. If you look at this example here, can you find all the F's in it? I'll give you a few seconds and then I'll highlight them. Chances are you won't have found them all. How many F's are there? There's 6. I'll just flag them up for you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Proofreading can be error prone. It can also take time. Another way of verifying that it's correct is what's known as confirmation. Whenever you go to save a file, it'll confirm it yes or no. That's a human verifying that the data is correct or it's correctly transferred over. So confirmation is good for short amounts of data or a question. What is validation? This is the next stage that we're going to need to understand. Validation is an automatic check done by computer. There's loads of them. You'll need to know these. So it's an automatic check performed by a computer to make sure data is sensible and reasonable. It may not be correct. So the first one is a type check. This is making sure that the data is a certain type. For example, if you are entering in phone numbers, you wouldn't want letters, you'd only want numbers. If you are entering in the date, you'd only want the date to be in a certain date format, if that makes sense. If you're entering in surnames, you need to make sure it's text and not numbers. That's a type check. Another type of check is a range check. A range check is making sure that it falls within two values or two boundaries. So like a maximum and a minimum. An example would be that your exam mark must be between 0 and 100. Your month of birth must be between 0 and 12. You can't have a month of birth of 13, for example. That would be a range check. Another type that we need to look at is a presence check. A presence check is very simple. Is it present or not? A bit like a school register. So data has to be entered. It's often going to be highlighted and it's used in forms whenever you're filling them in to make sure that data is there. Moving on. Another type of check that you might need to know about is like a format check. A format check would be used for the likes of dates and stuff. Or you could do a length check as well. A length check makes sure that it falls within a certain length. Like for example, your national insurance number must be 9 characters long. Your bank code must be a certain length of characters. Your sort code must be 6 characters long, for example. It means that the data must be a certain length. Good examples would be your account number or your bank sort code or your national insurance number. Lastly, that brings us on to a lookup table. And looking up table is basically that. It's looking up to make sure the data is held in a list or in a database. So a lookup could be to make sure it falls within a certain list, like Mr., Mrs., Doctor, Professor, whatever. They can be used in school registers to make sure that that item is in the database, and so on and so forth. Lastly, we've got this check 11 or modulus 11 check digit. This is where it gets a wee bit more difficult. A check digit is used for entering large numbers or reading from barcodes. The definition of a check digit is it's an extra value used to confirm that the previous number entered is correct. The one that we need to be aware of is called modulus 11. So where are they stored? A check digit is the last digit used to make sure that the previous number entered is entered incorrectly. They're used on IBSNs on books, they're used in food packaging, clothes pricing, CD tags, etc. If you take a look at home, you'll see them. So how it works? Well, this is the check digit here, and this number is used to make sure that the previous number is entered correctly. So how it works is this. We take that away, we do a mathematical calculation, and we see what the check digit should be, and then we compare it to the number entered. If the mathematical calculation brings up a different number than the check digit, we know an error has occurred. And that's basically it. To do it, we write down all the numbers and we give them a weighting. Okay, we start with 2 from the lowest number and work our way up. We multiply them all out, so 1 tens is 10, 8 nines is 72. Add them all up to get the total. We then divide them by 11. Okay, so we divide this number by 11 and we get 15 remainder 8. We subtract the remainder from 11, so 11 take away 8 is equal to 3. Our check digit would be 3, and we can see that it's entered correctly. So just in summary of all the validation checks, and then we'll look more a wee bit about check digits. We need to be aware of a presence check, making sure the data entered and it's not been left blank. We need to be aware of a type check, making sure the data is of a particular type like date or numeric or something like that. A length check, we need to make sure that the data entered is a certain length, e.g. the surname should be no longer than 30 characters. A range check, making sure that somebody's age should be between 0 and 130. A format check is making sure the data follows a certain format like postcodes or car registration numbers. We've got a check digit, which is a check digit is a digit added to the end of a numbers. It's calculated from the other digits and used to ensure that the whole number is inputted correctly. A common check digit is one used at the end of a barcode or ISBN number. And we've got lookup, where valid values of a key field are held in a list or a database. So check digits. This is my advice for writing them out. Whenever you get a question like this in the exam, you're going to get a small question like this employee ID number here. Now the check digit here, if we read this question carefully, it hasn't been placed on it yet, so we're not removing the last number. The check digit hasn't been placed on this 4-digit number yet. So what is the check digit? We start by here and we give them a weighting. So there's 2, 3, 4 and 5. After we've got the weighting, we're going to have to figure out the product of these here. So 5 2s is 10, 3 3s is 9, and so on and so forth. So we write out the digits, we write out the weighting, we write out the product. After we've got the product, we have to add these all up. So 5 plus 16 is 21, plus 9 is 30, plus 10 is 40. There's our product there, 40. The next thing we do is we divide by 11 and try and get the remainder after division. So I know that 3 11s are 33, 33 plus 7 is 40. So I know that if you divide 40 by 11 you get 3 remainder 7. 3 11s is 33 plus 7 is 40. 3 remainder 7 would be the answer. And lastly, to get our check digit, 11 take away 7 is 4. Our check digit would be 4. And that is the correct way to write them out. It's very important that you write out all these headings here, because you're going to get marks. And if you lose marks for writing out the headings, you should get some marks. There's 2 exceptions to the rule, and I'll talk you through them in a wee second or two. But again, just to summarise, we're going to have to write out the digits, the weighting, the product, the sum, the remainder, and then the check digit. How a check digit works. A check digit is an extra digit that is added to the end of the number. It's created from a maths calculation based on the other digits. The check digit is compared to the data entered to make sure they match and no errors might have occurred in entering the numbers. The two exceptions that you need is if you get a number after remainder after division and the remainder after division is 0, then the check digit is 0. Because 11 take away 0 is 11. You can't have a check digit of 11, so they write down the check digit as 0. Similarly, if you get a remainder of 1 after the division, 11 take away 1 is 10, which is 2 digits. Because we can't have 2 digits, we use an X instead, and that is quite difficult and something that they may ask you in the exam. In addition to this, you'll need to know about the following file extensions, and I'm going to leave you to revise them and research them. Thank you.